Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Black Minutes, Survival Steps to Beat COVID-19 in African Americans. I'm your host, Nisi Edwards, and my guest in the studio with me today is Raquel R. Reed, MA, LCM, HCS, LCAS, and she is more than a licensed clinical mental health counselor supervisor. Licensed clinical addiction specialist, speaker, CEO, author, and executive clarity coach. She's a life work specialist with more than 20 plus years of navigating through her own life storms. Raquel has impacted the lives of thousands through her work, bringing a renewed clarity of purpose to their lives. She has a master's degree in professional Christian counselor and is the CEO of
Catterflies
LifeWork LLC, providing therapeutic services and Empower Consulting with Raquel LLC, providing coaching and consulting services in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So welcome, Raquel. How are you today?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing well. So welcome to Black Minutes. I'm excited to have you with me in the studio today talking about COVID-19 and mental health. So what have you seen on your end? A lot, as you are aware, has been going on around the country. How is mental health affecting our community, if you wouldn't mind sharing, during this pandemic?
Okay. Well, honestly, I think that it's affecting us the same way that it's always been affecting us. There are different seasons that we go through, crisis, and a part of my background is in crisis management. And so this is not the first crisis we've seen, and this is sure not going to be the last crisis that we see. And so one of the things I plan to say this later, but I'm gonna say this right now. Before we get into some of the negatives about it, our people are resilient.
Yes.
So I don't want people to believe the hype that we're not okay. So, for example, many of my clients who are coming to me now, because they've been proactive in their mental health, they're not experiencing as many problems as some of us who actually could use the help, but we're too prideful, or we're letting the stigma of mental health get in the way. Now, this is the thing. If you look at our counterparts, white people, right? We know that they are good for suicidal ideation and all these types of things. Black people don't do that for the most part. That's not really how we roll. We get upset, we get angry, we might shoot something up, but we're not trying to kill ourselves. And it's because of that resilience that we've had for so many years. And it's also because many of us have faith. Yeah. And so when all else fails, we will go to God in prayer and say, look here, I need you right now. We may not go to a person and say we need some help, but we will go in our prayer closet and say, you know what? And look, even if we didn't know how to pray, we would get in there and say, you know what, God, this is a little too much for me. Can you help me?
Yes.
So we're doing that.
Yes, actually taking it back to the basics,
Yes. And this is why I became a Christian counselor, because I know that if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here. Like, yes, I have been through a lot, and that's what I'm more than a counselor. I'm somebody who has been through some stuff and overcome some stuff so I can help you do the same thing. Because why? Because I've overcome. So it's because of that faith and that hope. So as a therapist, if somebody comes in my office, regardless of their race, and they say, I feel hopeless, that's the worst thing a person can say to me. Because I know at that point that I need to get them hooked up to what hope is. I have to help them restore hope. Without that, we don't have anything else. So you can go to to somebody like me, and we can label you with PTSD, we can label you with depression, we can label you with anxiety. I don't care what you get, what the label is. At the end of the day, we got to help you restore some hope and belief that your life can change for the better.
Amen. Amen to that. I agree with everything you just said. And I'm also a woman of faith. And when I say taking it back to the basics, for me, it is taking it back to the basics, because I know as a woman of faith, as a Christian, where my hope and faith lies in Jesus. And I recognize that without him, I'm nothing. And so for me, when I'm going through things, and just like you, I've gone through a lot of things, and I'm still here today due to the Lord. And I know for a fact, for me, had it not been for the Lord, I wouldn't be here today talking to you or anyone else.
That's right.
For me, it's a faith walk, just like it is for you. And that hope that you're speaking of, I have talked to so many people, and some people have said to me, Raquel, well, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm going to go. And I will say to them, you have to have hope in the right source.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pour it in people, because people will let you down. Mm-hmm. So as a Christian counselor, I'm glad that you're here with me today. So let's say someone comes to you and they don't have hope. How do you work to help them restore that or get to that point?
Well, it's interesting. I work with people of all types of faith. So one of the things that I've learned over time is, because as a therapist, one of our skills needs to be that we're non-judgmental, right? So, but everybody has judgment at the end of the day. Well, what I've learned is that everybody has their own beliefs, and that's okay. If we can go back to that belief. Now, I'll say this, the belief is not a doorknob. Doorknobs don't heal you. Doorknobs don't, AA and NA have taught people for a long time, if you want to believe in the doorknob, go ahead and believe in the doorknob. That does not work, because that doorknob cannot help you, okay? So let's just keep that real. So you're going to find out real quick. I'm just going to keep it real with you. But if your faith happens to be, like, I have clients who are Muslim, I have all kinds of clients that believe that their faith is just different. And when I can connect them back to their faith and let their faith and what they know remind them of who they are and their authority, and sometimes I have to be honest with people. Low self-esteem is kind of like narcissism on the other spectrum. Okay? So either I think I've done everything for myself and nobody else can help me. That's narcissism. Right? I don't give any credit to my mama, my daddy, to God, to nobody. I've done this all. I'm just fabulous and I've done it all myself.
All about self.
Or you have very low self-esteem, which is self-loathing and saying that God hasn't done great things for you. That you're not who he said you are. He said that you're rich and blessed and walking in his fullness. He says that you're, an extraordinary person, right? If we don't believe those things, and sometimes what happens with me as a therapist is I'm reminding people of the things that they've lost sight of, because when we get into self-loathing, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have a job, I lost my job during COVID. And I'm not saying that that's not potentially a problem, but as you said, is your source money, or is your source God? Where's your source? Is your source the PPP loan? Is your source Trump? Is your source, what's the other guy's name? Biden? Who's your source? Pelosi? Because if it's that, then, for example, I'm a small business. I've been waiting on the PPP, but you know what I decided? Whether the PPP come or not, I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
So that's a mentality. So we're talking about having a mentality of abundance. When you get into self-loathing about anything, whether it's COVID or anything else, that's where our problem lies. It's at the root. So what I do is I help people come off of the surface talking, and we dig into the root of why you are thinking the way that you are thinking. So we're working on mindset. We do not have a mental health problem. We have a mind management problem.
I like that. Mind management problem. And then something else that was key. You said, who is your source? That PPP loan? Is it Trump? Is it Pelosi? Is it Biden? And this segment is going to be is called Keeping It Real, because that is keeping it real where the goats can get it, you know. When you think about it, you can believe whatever you want to believe about any politician or whatever else, but your source has to be in that has the power to deliver you. That has power, because when we start getting into things such as Trump, Pelosi, Biden, we can put all our faith we want in man and woman, and what happens? They will let you down. So then we're going to go, if you don't get that PPP loan, and if that's your only source and what you have faith in, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? It's nice to get that loan, but if you don't, then what do you do?
Right. So you either pivot or you perish. How do you pivot because of what is going on right now to take care of you first? Put your mask on first. I've had to tell several people that in the last few days. Put your mask on first, and then you can help your family. You cannot help anybody until you take care of yourself first. You are that valuable. You are that valuable. And the problem is, many times in the households that we've grown up in, we have a lot of trauma that we don't realize, especially as African Americans. We don't realize that it was trauma, you know, and we won't call it that. And so when they come in the office sometimes and I have to explain to them what trauma kind of looks like, then they say, oh, I was yeah, and nobody can really call trauma for you. You have to decide what that is, but I have to do some level of education. And so what's interesting is during COVID, what they're concerned about is the number of people whose PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, we're going to have more people with that, they believe. But I believe if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, they will be all right. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. I'm so happy that I don't work for somebody, that I'm not filtered to not be able to talk about my God and who he is in my life. How many people come to me and say, Raquel, I never knew there was anything as a Christian counselor. And I have people of different faiths that when they meet me and they see how excited I am and how happy I am and how I share stories about when things were really dark for me, how I turned to God and how he helped me, they're motivated by that. They're inspired by that, and they want to be connected to that. Who are you connected to? Who are you listening to? Are you sitting around watching the news all day? Because if you are, just like when that storm came through here, I can't remember the name of that storm, but we had a storm come through here and it was horrible. And I was working at JOB at the time. I would go to work, actually we couldn't go to work because the highways were flooded. We couldn't even get to work. And so I was sitting watching the news, and even me, a mental health therapist, an addictions therapist, began to get consumed by the media, and I began to feel depressed. You cannot sit and feed yourself junk all day long on the media and expect to be okay.
You're absolutely, and I limit how much of that I am willing to watch, because what I have observed is, if in the beginning, when this first hit the fan, listen to that day in and day out, I was getting headaches. I didn't feel good. And I said, you know what? I cannot let this stuff infiltrate me and just take control and make me just feel a certain way. So I choose to limit how much that I'm going to watch and where I'm going to go to get the information that I need. Because some people, they're selling doom and gloom, stress, and everything else. And at the end of the day, I thought, and I've even shared this with members of my support group. They will post things and they will reach out to me and say, hey, have you heard this? Have you seen this? And have you done this? And I would say, you know what? You need to tone it down a bit. You are too plugged in to that. What is your prayer life like? Are you praying God? Are you seeking God? And you know, Raquel, I've had some people say to me, well, where is God in the midst of this? And my response is, so you think this COVID is bigger than God. You know, I said, so is that thing? I said, because so what you're really saying is God has no power. I said, that's not true. I says, God is still here. You're still here. We're going to get through it. And then some will say, well, people who lost their lives, where was God? I says, God is still here. God, and I said, so you cannot take God out of any of this. I says, what was happening, I feel, what we're looking at is decision that man has made, and seeing to it that certain communities don't have access to the testing, being slow to be responsive and other things. I says, but that's not God, that's man.
Yeah, definitely. And there were several points there, but the one I want to make sure we hit is prayer is a coping skill.
Yes, I like that.
It is a coping skill. And unfortunately, if you are not a therapist of faith, you probably don't teach that. And so our community goes lacking. I'm in several groups online, and even before COVID, sometimes therapists would post, I just got a new client today who said that their therapist previous was Caucasian or some other race, and they said this to them, and it will be horrible, like racist things. And I'm like, and that wasn't the first time they had offended them or said something horrible. But it doesn't mean that you must have somebody of the same color as you. It doesn't mean that, but it means that when they show you who they are, run.
Believe them the first time.
Believe them the first time. Don't stay there and wait for them to damage you. I tell all my clients, if I'm not the right therapist for you, fire me, because just because my skin is black and yours is black too, does not make me the perfect therapist for you. You must know that, and you must value yourself enough to say, look, I don't think it's working out with you and I for X, Y, and Z reason. I'm going to find me someone else. And that it's okay to do that. Now, I don't have that happen often, but it's the case. And there are times when even I, as the therapist, might say to a client, I don't think that this is working. It's called termination. I don't like to call it that, but that's what they call it in the books. So I might have to sit down with that person and say, hey, I don't think that I'm the best fit for you. And I will help you with a referral. And that's okay. At the end of the day, like I said, we have the same issues. You mentioned access to care, okay?
Yes.
That was an issue before COVID. You see what I'm saying? So it's the news media sometimes makes it bigger than what it is. But you also mentioned to me a concern about physical health versus mental health.
Yes.
And the fact that they may not be talking about mental health as much. And I think the reason that is because there's going to be an aftermath, okay? Because we're not addressing it now. For example, my office, the phones are not ringing for people to get therapy. What people are doing right now is they are going to things like Talkspace, where they can chat with you online. Is not the same level of effectiveness as a one-on-one situation, okay? It's good if that's all you can get, but it's not the same level of effectiveness. So that's what people are signing up for now, because they're using people like Michael Phelps to appeal to you. Now, Taraji P. Henson has a campaign for mental health, but you're not hearing about it on mainstream media. You're not hearing about that. So that comes from a voice of a person of color, that if it was projected more people of color would access the care.
And also, Raji, I know that she has had an experience when it comes down to mental health due to her own personal trauma. So I know that she's very vested in this.
Right. And so, but we need her on regular cable.
Yes.
With her commercials. I've reached out. It just hasn't gone well. I haven't been able to really connect. So I think that there's a disconnect, and that's one of the problems, is that in order for any of us to do what God has called us to do, if we don't begin to work together and collaborate, that's going to be our detriment. In our community, we need to see, sometimes we think too big. How about you just think about leading at your house and then getting you a few people right in your neighborhood and touching their lives? Because remember I was talking about low self-esteem and
Yes.
that self-loathing and pity that we have? The only way out of that is when you go help somebody else. So everybody that's watching this, if you're feeling down about your situation right now, I want you to decide that you're going to help somebody else. Because there's always someone who's in a situation that is more damning than yours.
Amen.
And when you see that and you come out of that and you begin to go help, you can't stay there. It's almost like faith and fear. When we're watching the news, they're promoting fear. Okay? But faith and fear cannot exist in the same space. So if you would turn off the news and turn on something inspirational and uplifting, even if it was you love R&B music, dance for about 30 minutes with your favorite person. Like I love me some Fantasia. Turn Fantasia on, or Mary J. Blige. Now that's my favorite. Turn that on and just go ahead and get it for a little bit. And those endorphins are going to go into your brain and they're going to change things for you. Go walk. You can go walk. They might have put restrictions on certain other things, but you can still go walk.
That's true. I agree with that with the music. I mean, I find that to be therapeutic. I don't care, even if I'm listening to, Al Green, who is one of my favorite artists, if I'm to Shalimar or Tony, I mean, whatever works for you to get it on,
Yes. Yes. That's right. And I want to read you something, because one of the things that I do is I create searches so that I get the information that I'm actually looking for, and then I can disseminate that information the way I want to. So one of my concerns is that we have been taught what to think instead of how to think. And if we would begin to dissect things that are coming to us, so when you do watch the news, turn it around 360. They presented one view to you, now present another. So for example, in an article I read, in general, minorities, particularly African Americans, have poorer health and health outcomes than do white people. Okay, so that's one article saying we have, as minorities, have poorer health and health outcomes. But again, what do we have? We have faith. Okay, and so that faith gets us through, and when we're living a very long time. Then it says, although Hispanics and Black individuals have a lower risk of having a psychiatric disorder as compared with other white counterparts, those who become ill tend to have more persistent disorders. Okay, so if we continue to prioritize our faith in even helping us with the mental health piece of it, all we need is faith, reduce the stigma of getting the help when we need it, right?
Right.
Not being afraid to take some medicine if it's required, because a lot of times you might be approached about taking medicine, but it doesn't have to be a long-term thing. It just might be an antidepressant to help you through for the next 3 months, get your head clear. It's not addictive, and then you can move on to continuing to manage your own mind on your own. Okay, so they're constantly comparing us and our white counterparts to say we're doing worse than they are. But I think in some areas, we're actually doing better. And then it says, past research shows that African Americans and other minority individuals have higher rates of PTSD than white individuals. Well, systematically, we've been traumatized.
Yes.
Okay, and we continue to be traumatized, and we continue to expose ourselves unnecessarily to trauma.
True.
We're doing that. So if we would just pull back from that. Now, some of the past stuff in our childhood, yeah, you don't have control over, but when you become an adult, you have way more control over that. And so what I'm saying is, I feel that our people really need to begin to ask themselves, what am I feeding my mind? What am I feeding my body? What am I feeding my spirit?
Yes.
Because if we focus on how we're doing that, like for example, faith must be fed. Your body must be fed, right? Your mind must be fed. So again, if you're constantly watching the news every single day and you're being controlled by group thinking and you
Yep.
don't have your own individual way of thinking, this is where the problem comes, because what they're telling you is that we have a mental health problem. What I'm telling you is we have a mind management problem.
I like that, and I agree with that. And I remember growing up, my parents used to always say, especially my grandparents, and I'm named after my grandmother Nisi on my mother's side, and she used to always say, "Little Nisi, think for yourself."
Yes.
Okay, so they always instilled in us, don't get caught up in that group thing, because that may not be for you. Think for yourself. You got your own mind, you got your own brain. Think for yourself and make the right decisions for you, because sometimes I've seen people, they get so caught up in what everybody else say, and then they have to take it back and get back to, but what's best for you? Because what's best for them may not be best for you. And when you were talking about trauma, just I feel for even our African American men every day living in trauma, that if they leave their home, they travel somewhere, are they going to be stopped for no apparent reason? Now, I've been stopped a couple of times. One time in particular, Raquel, I was leaving work and I pulled out of the parking lot like everybody else. I watched my speed. I didn't run any traffic lights or anything. An officer pulled me over. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I didn't even know why he pulled me over. So I pulled over. He comes to the window of my car. He looks through my car. I don't know what he's looking for. And I asked him, "So, officer, why did you stop me?
Right.
Why am I being pulled over?" Because I see all the other cars moving.
Mm-hmm.
He never said why he pulled me over, never said why he stopped me. He went to his car, came back, and he says, "You're free to go." I feel that they were running my place looking for something.
Mm-hmm.
Was working in an all-white community, and I felt that they were thinking, hey, maybe, this is someone we need to be stopped for whatever reason. But when you deal with that every single day, you're right, that is his own source of PTSD, plus other traumas that we put ourselves through. So what I have recently started doing, this will probably be our 4th week. I recently created, Raquel, a prayer group. And in this prayer group is me and all my sisters. And I have one of my cousins in this group. We come together for prayer on Mondays and Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been beautiful. That's the transformation. So I view that as our bounce back power group. Because, you have days where you just maybe feel that maybe the day didn't go too well. Maybe you wasn't having a good day and all the other issues of life. But I tell them this is our bounce back power. This is our source. God is our source. This is where we come together and pray and read scriptures to lift up one another. And
Right.
It's so good.
Yes. And it brought me back to something that you said earlier. You were talking about how you felt, but then instead of saying the feeling word, you said feeling some kind of way. Okay?
Right.
So one of the things that I teach my clients about that is the way that we cheat ourselves out of not acknowledging how we truly feel.
True.
One thing that I realize, regardless of whether I'm working with a child or an adult, and even a highly educated adult, is this inability to express feeling words. So I often have a chart in my office with emoticons on it with different faces. And when I'm working with little kids, I take, little things, little emoticons that are fluffy and cute and they have those faces on them so that I can teach that, because That's what's wrong. We need to be able to say how we feel. So in the Black community, we have our way of speaking, and I understand you, you understand me, but the detriment in that is I need you to say the feeling word. I need that to resonate with you. So instead of saying I feel some kind of way, name the feeling. I felt angry.
Yeah. Call
I
a thing.
felt, call a thing a thing. It is so important in all of this. And then our level of emotional intelligence. A lot of people, when we went to school, here we go with groupthink again. Your IQ is so important. That's what they taught us.
Yep.
No, what's real important is EQ or EI, emotional intelligence. That's what's really important. So I'm gonna give you an example of something that was just in the news the other day, or today, I think I saw it. There was a mother and son who were in the Sam's. Did you see that? They were in Sam's, and they had purchased a big screen TV, and then they walked out. The TV didn't fit in his car, so he came back in for some reason.
Okay.
So they said that he stole the TV. So an associate told the security guard he did not steal the TV. I'm verifying his purchase. But the young man, Black, was so irritated by what had already happened that, in my opinion, he allowed his emotions to get the better of him. And as I watched the video, his behavior began to help escalate the situation instead of take it down. Now, you made a great point that as Black men, they know that this is highly probable.
Mm-hmm.
But what you also have to know is you do have some level of control. When you begin to think that you have no control, that's when everything goes left. When you begin to think in life, think about any situation that happens in life. I don't have any options. That PPP loan doesn't come through. I'm not, if I don't get this stuff, if I don't, whatever it is, if I don't get it, I have no other options. That's the second thing as a therapist that lets me know you're in a bad place and I got to help you get out of there quick. So as he was in that situation, emotional intelligence is when you're not able to control your emotions. Instead, your emotions control you.
The question for you in that situation, and thanks for bringing that to my attention. No, I didn't. I see it because, as I mentioned, I've just been eliminating what I'm watching. It's been too much fun. But in that situation, let's say you're someone that your emotional intelligence, that maybe you could have done a better job. But I think sometimes, and I'm not making excuses, what if it's a situation where you're just so sick and tired of every time you turn around, here comes somebody accusing you of something. And the way I look at it is, some people are on the edge and you just don't know how close they are to that edge. And so situations like that and others will just cause you sometimes to lose it. So how do you help your own self in situations like that with emotional intelligence when you're tired, you're frustrated, you're angry? I've been angry at times, sometimes where when I just said, call a thing, sometimes when you're calling a thing, the frustration stems from those that you're sharing with how you feel. Mm-hmm. They don't get it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things I always tell people is when you're really, let's just say, pissed off, okay? If you're pissed off, one of the things that you need to begin to do immediately, everybody listen to me, I don't care what the situation is, I don't care what the feeling is, get some air to your brain.
Okay.
Get some air there, because that air, the word of God says that when God made man a living soul, it was after he breathed breath into him.
Yes.
So that the short of it is, that's how important breath is to us as individuals, because guess what? If you don't breathe, you die.
That's true.
Okay? So then, whatever the emotion is, even if a policeman has you, and I can imagine if something like that happened to me, I can promise you I will be breathing, because that's the thing that you got to do to get your mind to think clearly. You must do it. And it doesn't matter if you're in a board meeting and somebody's coming for you, and you know the reason they coming for you is because you Black and they're intimidated by you. You still can sit there and take the, can't nobody take that away from you. That's not a sign of aggression. You know, we the angry Black woman, right? If we go off on somebody. So we don't want to be called that. Get your composure. I remember being in a situation where, because this is the truth, it's not always somebody of another race that's coming for you. Sometimes your own people come for you.
That's true. Because all folk not kinfolk.
That's right. So in this situation, one of my sisters came for me that worked for me. And we were in a meeting with like 50 people in the room. And later, several people said, the composure that you had when that girl came for you, I have never seen anything like that in my life. Okay? I had somebody say to me just a few days ago, I was explaining a situation where somebody slighted me. And they said, you always behave that way. I'm just not there yet. I've watched you time after time, and and it's a muscle that you build. It's a muscle that you build. So in that situation with that young man, what I noticed was that he was angry for sure. But here's the other thing to your question. Emotional intelligence lets you realize that your actions are not just about you.
Amen.
His mother was with him. She ended up getting slammed on the floor too.
Ooh.
She was arrested. They put handcuffs on her and everything. And she was in, so even if that didn't happen, she had to watch her son. She was watching what happened to her son. So if he could have pulled his emotions together, I'm not saying that this police or security guard person would not have still done an injustice. I'm not saying that. But I think many times we think that if we don't physically fight back, that we are weak, and that is not true. So if you're emotionally intelligent, you will know that. You're not weak. They don't expect us to use our minds.
No. And you know
so
what?
That's what you gotta do. You gotta give them. Whenever you're in a situation with somebody, you know they're not what they expect of you. Don't give it to them.
No. And you know what? I had a situation once where I worked from this company, and I shouldn't have taken the job, but I did. It was one of the most toxic working environments I've ever worked in, where I was bullied for 2.5 years. And I had a situation where I didn't have just one. I had several people coming for me. Okay. We were in a meeting, and I'm thinking, I'm taking a deep breath, and I'm filtering everything that is being said to me about me. I did not lose my composure. And later I had a couple of people, other people on our management team said to me, you should have spoke up. You came across as looking meek and too mild. And I said, this is what you fail to realize. I says, it took power.
Yes.
To remain silent. I says, you don't get that power. I says, because if I didn't have that power that kept me composed, place out.
That's
I said, be careful what you ask for, And I thought to myself, I says, okay, they were looking for the angry Black woman. They were looking for me to clown and act a fool and cuss everybody else out. That wasn't going to serve me. I probably would have been fired. Number of things could have happened, but that wasn't going to resolve the issue because I knew what I was dealing with. And I knew that I had two options: find another job, look for another job within the company, because I cannot control anybody. The way I look at it is, I can't control them. I can control how I choose to respond. And that's what I did, even though some feel as though I should have been more combative or I should have cursed people out. And that's just not my style of doing things.
Right. And so that's what's going to take us from lower level positions to positions where we are decision makers, and that's what you want. I work with a lot of leaders. It doesn't matter if I'm working with a corporate person, someone who's gotten really high up the corporate ladder, or they own their own business, versus a housekeeper. It doesn't matter, because guess what? That housekeeper may have started out as the housekeeper, but as her emotional intelligence grows and she's able to handle conflict, then she becomes the owner of the company.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's why it's really important. And so if we're getting anything to our community right now, we're teaching them how to fish, right? We have to go back into our community and say, well, if the government is not providing this, then how will I maybe reduce my rate and take 10 people or 5 people that I can help during this pandemic if they reach out for it. So now I have something called Open Path. Open Path allows someone who may not have insurance or needs a lower rate. So for example, my rate is $150, might be $180, right? So if you come through Open Path, you could pay as little as $30 to see me.
Wow. Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So we need to get the information out. When this first started, I had to explain to my clients, I had to do a lot of education the very first 2 weeks because people were freaking out. And I was like, look, what we have here is you're going to keep calling your insurance company, and they're going to change things, but it's going to take some time. And so now I have some clients whose insurance policies are offering them telehealth services, so being seen this way, for the rest of the year. So you just have to stay informed. You have to advocate for yourself. Stop waiting for everybody else to do it for you, and get the information that you need. And I'll say this, stop exposing yourself. We already talked about the media too, right? But then also going out unnecessarily exposing yourself, because one of the things as I was preparing to talk to you today that I realized is one of the reasons that this pandemic can affect us negatively if we allow it to is because, for one, we have a lot of African Americans that are in the healthcare industry. So we are, not me, because I'm staying home, okay? Not most therapists. Most therapists are seeing people online, but you have nurses. There's a lot of African American nurses, a lot of Latino nurses. So we talk about people of color, not just Black people, but people of color, period. It's a lot of us out there making an impact, and we're essential workers, and we don't get to stay home.
No, we don't. And for Black Menace, throughout this series, I've interviewed a couple of Black nurses who have had COVID, being there on the front line, who have their own concerns, their own fears, not wanting to take this back home to their families. And also when they've returned to work, wanting to make certain that they were now negative instead of positive, because they didn't want to spread it to any other patients, even though they may have contacted it from a patient.
That's right. And so that's a very valid concern. And that's the courageousness of a lot of people. I have a friend that's a nurse, and she would not go out to her job to help. I just know that about her. She's that selfless. Even though she has a new grandchild here, she's still going to be at that job taking care of the people that have been given in her care. So we're doing what we need to do, but we have to, again, put our mask on first, take self-care really important, but let's also prioritize our mental health care over physical, right? Over the physical right now, removing the stigma of it all. But we must take care of our mental health. So in the scriptures, when the Bible says that we were to work by the sweat of our brow, I believe that he was talking about our minds.
Yes.
I haven't had this conversation with anybody else. It's probably going to be in my book, but I really believe that. Look, here's your brow. What's behind it? That mind.
Yes.
And isn't it hard to manage it sometimes? It's like that for everyone, regardless of what color you are. But for the African American community, I heard someone say it like this: we were enslaved. We weren't slaves.
No.
You see, so what we got to do is get away from that slave mentality and begin to build our community up. And it doesn't mean that we're only helping each other. It might mean that you're a teacher to somebody of another color.
That's true. And the other thing too, is you was quoting the scripture. The other thing that came to me was the word tells us our people perish due to a lack of knowledge.
Yes.
And we've got to have that knowledge, because knowledge is also power. Learn how to use what you have. So when COVID first hit, one of the things that I did, Raquel, with my support group was, these are women and men who have fibromyalgia. My not-for-profit is geared towards people with chronic pain. Mm-hmm. And I went to them and I said, okay, some of you are working part-time. Some of you, money is really, really tight. You may be on Social Security disability. Mm-hmm. Some of you, just a lot is going on. I said, so what I want you to do is to think about what skills sets do you have that you can use for revenue to earn money for yourself. And right. So they, what do you mean? I said, some of you are copywriters, some of you are bloggers, some of you are graphic designers, some of you have all these different skills. Let's use that where you can start earning money, whether it's creating your own Etsy store, your own Zazzle store, because some of them are so creative and very artistic. And I said to them, what are your thoughts on doing that? And some said, well, I'm waiting to see about the stimulus check. And I said, whoa.
Yeah.
I said, now, the way things are going, some people may not get one, and if they do get one, they don't know when they're going to see it.
Yeah, so you can't count on that.
Right. Don't let that be your only source, because you're going to need more than $1,200, right. Live off of.
But you know what? That also, and what I'm going to do for you is I want to recap the things that we can do. That's what I want to do before we go. But what you mentioned about creativity, that's another one of the things as a therapist that I do with my clients, is I help them to reignite the creativity, because outside of breath, that's I think maybe the second most important thing is your creativity, because when you lose that, God created us to create. Oh, 3 things. How about this? Connection, creativity, and breath.
Okay.
Connection. I'm gonna have to write that down because that just came to me. But those will be the 3 things that I think are most important: breath, creativity, and connection. And that's why COVID is a challenge for many people, because of the lack of connection. So the introverted people are really now probably getting to see how valuable it is to spend time with people, and they may begin to do things a little bit differently when this restriction is lifted. So introverts, kind of think about that. Okay, now, so I'm going to give you, Nisi, what we need to do, okay?
Okay.
What we need to do is limit unnecessary exposure, that is to media and to the outside elements right now. Don't try to have parties and do graduation parties and all that. Well, ton of people that you don't know where they've been, okay? Then we as a community are going to have to teach our people how to fish, okay? Yeah. So we talked about that. Then we need to prioritize health and wellness over finances and even physical health. And I'm not saying either one of those is not important. They're important. We need to prioritize right now, especially mental health. So get the help that you need, however you need to get it, because there's many therapists out here who are providing either no fee or reduced fees for you to be seen. Then teach our people how to think and not what to think. So get out of group think. Who are you learning from? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a coach? Do you have a spiritual mother or father? Do you have a pastor? Who's speaking over your life? Who's helping you? You can't do it all by yourself. And then vote.
Oh, yes.
Okay, vote, because if you're not voting, then you can't complain about what's happening right now.
Yes.
You can't do that. It's not fair because you didn't take your time to go out and vote. So policymakers are important, and if you are not at the table, your voice will not be heard. And I got two more. Advocate for yourself. Stop looking for a handout, but speak up and advocate for what it is that you need. Articulately do that. And collaborate. We as a community must collaborate. There's no need to be intimidated by your brother or sister. They're going to help you. We got to help each other. Okay, that's it.
This is some good stuff. So this is what I have. Limit unnecessary exposure to the media, as well as putting yourself at risk out there with social gatherings. Teach how to fish. Prioritize your health and wellness. Teach how to think for yourself. Vote. And I love that because too much is at stake. Also, advocate for yourself, articulate your needs, and collaborate. And I also wrote down what you said a few minutes ago. Your breath, your connection, your creativity. See, I wrote that down for you. Oh, this is some good stuff. So Raquel, I know we're out of time, but I know what we need to do. I need to create a women's group where you to come in and help us women with the mental health, to breathe, that this is so needed. It's an investment in ourselves. Would you be willing? Would you be interested?
Of course. And I've created a course online called the CEO Woman. Conquering Everyday Obstacles is what it stands for. So whether you're a true CEO of your own corporation or a woman who has a family, right? And those same skills that it takes to lead that family are the same skills that it would take to run a successful empire. So that's what my program is focused on: women, building women up. And there is a great part of it that talks about the emotional intelligence. And you can find that on my website at empoweryou.com. And then for mental health and for Empower You, I do coaching and consulting, right? But then at caterflies.com, that's where I do therapy, but that's only for people in North Carolina. I'm only licensed in the state of North Carolina. I would definitely love to do that because I love my women.
Yes. I tell you, I've really enjoyed you being on here because, as I shared with you earlier, that so much has been stated in the media about the physical health, but it is the emotional health, the emotional intelligence. And I just love this because this is going to help so many people. And I thank you for your time. And you have the last word. Is there anything else you want to share?
We have not a mental health problem. We have a mind management problem. Don't allow your emotions to control you. Get in control of your emotions. And there is no telling how far you will go when you realize who your source is. Money's not your source. The president is not your source. The next president is not your source, right? All of these things are not your source. God's our source. And when we develop that relationship, primarily, we'll go somewhere and we'll go there together.
Amen. We need that God source, that God power. I know the one thing you haven't told us yet, your books.
Okay, so this is one of my books. This is Silhouette of Her, Naked and Unashamed. It's a book of poetry and life lessons. It's on Amazon.com. Silhouette of Her, Naked and Unashamed. And I am working on a children's book right now that will address COVID, and it will address bringing clarity to your children's lives. And on the same day, I will also release my book on clarity for for all women, actually, for all women. So, but it's got a nice little twist to it. So I'm working on that now, and they'll both release this year within, I'm not going to say when, but if you want to connect with me, go to empoweryou.com and get on that mailing list. empoweryou.com, get on my mailing list, and when that book is about to release, when we begin the promos for that, you'll know, and you'll be able to buy a book for you that addresses a little bit of what's going on right now, but it's going to take you further than that, because we can't get stuck with what's going on right now. You got to see further. You got to be able to project, because your future is bright. Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans that I have for you, plans prosper you and to give you a hope and a future. So I'm going to help you with that, but I'm going to help your children to develop some emotional intelligence about this. And the book is going to be for kids in the 3rd to 5th grade range, and it's going to have a lesson plan in the back for teachers and for parents, because guess what? Parents are teachers right now, whether you want to be or not. So I'm going to help you. You'll have a way to really sit and process what's happening with your children, because if you don't, just because they're silent right now, you could take that as, oh, they're fine. The silences actually can be scary. So
Yeah.
we need to get our children talking so we know what is going on in their minds.
When you get that release, please stay in contact with me, because I would like to buy a few copies of that to share within my community and with some family and friends that I know who can definitely benefit from that. So thank you so much for being here today with Black Menace. I wish you well.
My pleasure.